Okay, I don't want to take more time because I
Thank you.
myself are extremely curious to listen to our discussion tonight. Now, for the first turn, please welcome Professor Nelly van Doorn. Nelly van Doorn-Harder teaches religious studies at Wake Forest University, USA, and holds an appointment for freedom of religion or belief at the Vrije Universiteit Amsterdam. She has been a member of the Oslo Coalition Indonesian project since its inception in 2002. Her research concerns Islam in Indonesia and Coptic Christianity in Egypt, focusing on issues of leadership, gender, freedom of religion, and interfaith. Currently, she is working on a book about the Indonesian National Commission for Women's Rights, Komnas Perempuan, analyzing Komnas activities concerning violence against women, such as domestic violence and child marriage. She has published widely about the Copts of Egypt and about Muslim women's activism in Indonesia. Some of her publications are Women Shaping Islam, Indonesian Muslim Women Reading the Quran, 2006, and Copts in Context, Negotiating Tradition, Transition, and Modernity, 2017. Copts in Modernity, co-edited volume, 2021. It's very new. And Purifying Indonesia, Purifying Women, the National Commission for Women's Rights, and the 1965-66 Anti-Communist Violence, Cross-Current Journal, Fall 2019. Please join me to welcome Professor Nelly van Doorn-Harder, and you have also 20 minutes. Floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Bu Atun Wardatun. Selamat pagi semuanya, selamat malam. Thank you so much for inviting me to this extremely important panel. And I would especially like to thank Bu Nurjanah and Bu Emi Susanti, and of course, Wahidah Siregar, and Bu and Atun for being the moderator, for being the organizers, for moderating this. And I apologize to Professor Wahidah Zein Siregar that I am taking her place first, because at 10 o'clock, I have another meeting, which at 10 o'clock my morning here. And I thought we would be done by then. I really feel very, very blessed that I was asked to think about these two very important works written by two women, Professor Shahla Haeri and Professor Musdah Mulia, who I both consider some of the giants of feminist thinking and feminist writing. They have given us each a very thought-provoking work. And to me, it is really visible that these works are built, are grounded in careers that were dedicated to lives of activist research about the rights and the position of women. And so I see these two books as tools for all of us that we can learn from, that we should take to heart, and that we should consider seriously about what their observations and findings mean for us. And when I say us, I say all women. As you know, I live in America. I am not Indonesian and I'm not a Muslima, yet I felt addressed by both books, because the pressing issues of our time, and especially Abu Musdah Mulia addresses that, concern all of us. And women have to take up the challenge to exercise their own agency and authority. I think that is what comes out of both these books, because the queens that were successful were very inclusive, had not just had charisma, but had empathy and sympathy for all. And that is what seems to have made them very successful and lasting in their reign. And also what it brings home to me is the importance of intergenerational cooperation, that this is no longer an issue of a younger generation or the older generation, that cooperation has become more vital than ever in our current day. I'm going to start first with giving some remarks about Professor Haeri's book. And the first thing I observed was that men will stop at nothing to somehow cut down a woman that they feel threatened or overshadowed by. Whether it's a woman in a high position of governance or any other position, they will find ways to stop her. And it is very important, and I'm coming back also to the hadith that Ibu Atun Wardatun just so ably quoted as well, that no country will prosper if a woman is the ruler. The fact that that hadith had to be dug out in 1988 should really tell us enough about the underlying motivation of doing this. And I remember at the time when the same was done against Megawati Sukarnoputri, I felt very much moved and forced to write an article about it, because I saw so much what can I say it, politicking and somehow conspiring together to bring down this woman who was obviously very popular among a large part of the population. But basically, what we are looking at is forms of sexism. And I think that is something we should always keep in mind as well, whether it is about women in high position or women in low position. Wherever women have a voice, certain forms of sexism come in. And sexism starts with labeling. And I'm coming back to that. It is finding a label to bring someone down. And that's why I actually was honored that we were just Zoom bombed by a gentleman or whoever it was, because he labeled all of us maybe feminists or something, and felt that he had to do something. And I am very proud of the moderators for cutting him down and not giving him a space. And I'm extremely proud of Professor Musdah Mulia for just continuing, because that was the way to do it. Do not stop, do not give in. I also reading Professor Shahla's book reminded me of what we saw during the elections with in 2016 with Hillary Clinton. I mean, we saw it all play out in real life. We saw someone who was constantly attacked for a physical appearance, whose capabilities and capacities were questioned, whose every little move was torn down. And as we know, the nation ended up electing a man with half her experience, not even half of experience, half her wisdom or intelligence. I know I sound biased, but I think this was almost observable to all who watched. And also what always comes to my mind is that Hillary Clinton's motto, it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a village, which means we all have to do it together. That was her message when she was the First Lady. And that is how she lived her life and continued developing her
Itu
career.
artinya kita harus banyak melakukan kolaborasi.
I think I hear the translator. Sorry.
I'll go to the different space. How about right now?
Yes, Siti Nurjanah, I hear you. You have to mute yourself. Yeah.
Okay.
But anyway, we went from a woman who taught us that it takes a village to raise a child to someone who became the president, whose message was me, me, and me, and man, man, and man. That was the message as far as it came across to me as a woman. So we see also in Professor Haeri's book that what seems to protect women is their high position, their status, the dynastic powers of their family, divinely ordained birthrights, and the birthright that helps them take the throne, that helps them come on the throne after their father. Siti Nurjanah, I hear you again.
Oh God, I'm so sorry.
That's okay. So after their father or their brother or their son or husband falls away and there's nobody else to take the place, a woman has her chance. I think a very, very clear example of such a woman is Queen Elizabeth, the medieval queen of England, who came to the throne after her father died and her sister had ruled. And I'm coming back to that for a second as well in a few minutes. But then what is also very, very striking to me is that in spite of all these, let's say, helpmates that these women have, the help of their dynasty, the help of their wealth, of their family's power, they still need all the protection and all the help they can get to stay in power, to gain power and to stay in power. And for example, I think this example of Queen Arwa of Yemen, who then basically escaped the fate of Queen Razia Sultan in India by being elevated to the level of a Hujjah. And as we know, Queen Razia Sultan was brought down by accusations of immodesty, immorality, and although it is male elite feeling threatened, they basically, whatever they could use, and we basically, our conclusion should and could be, they would have managed to find something to get rid of her, whatever it needed. They did not want her there. Queen Arwa escaped that fate by having bestowed on her by being given this high spiritual mystical position of a Hujjah. And then the man still go on, and we can look at this positive but also negative. The man still go on to explain that she is now in the realm where there is no male and no female. That means her female identity has been removed. And to me, it means that half of the population has been eradicated. This is not just about Queen Arwa. This is about all women who work for whatever cause, who exercise their agency. And we see the same happening to Benazir Bhutto, because in a way, Professor Shahla's book very clearly describes how Benazir Bhutto had an incredible charisma and attraction, and how people loved her and adored her and came to cheer her on. And she herself somehow also gained this mystical, somehow aura, this mystical position by, for example, sensing and foretelling her own death. And you quote her, Professor Shahla, by saying that she reached the level of a person who died before she died. Well, that did not save her. Not long after that, she was murdered, as we know, and the whole world. I remember it was Christmas vacation here. I remember how shocked we all were, because we were all home hearing the news immediately, and we were all shocked, and our whole family was shocked that this happened. And so again, when I come back to Queen Elizabeth of England, then we see that, you know, she basically ended up staying in power by making the decision not to marry, by somehow joining the Queen Arwas and the Benazir Bhuttos who did marry in a certain way, but by joining a certain rank of a spirituality that was untouchable, because Queen Elizabeth lived in a time that we had monasteries and convents where women became nuns. And so there was an option for women not to get married and to live lives to remain a virgin. And that also lifted them up from the ordinary platform where ordinary beings and women operate. And she was a very open mind for her time, for medieval times. She left England with, for example, freedom of religion. she decided to end the violence, the bloodshed between Catholics and Protestants by deciding that all should be free to choose whichever of the two they wanted to follow, because there were only two choices in those days in England. But we cannot take for granted that women are smart and peaceful, by the way, because Queen Elizabeth's predecessor, Queen Mary, we know as Bloody Mary. She went down into history only being remembered for murdering so many people because she tried in many ways to do something we see today that is done by, let's say, extremist-minded, radical-minded individuals. And I'm not just talking about Islam. I'm also talking about other religions. I mean, we have them in Christianity. We have them in Hinduism. We have them in all religions. Individuals who want to turn the clock back. While populations have grown, have gone on, have moved on, they want to go back in history. And that's what Queen Mary wanted. She wanted, after a large part of England had to become Protestant because her father had forced them to, because maybe you know the history, maybe not. He wanted to marry another wife and the Catholic Church did not allow that. The Church did not allow him to divorce, so he divorced anyway and decided to create his own religion. And his own version of Christianity. So after that, she tried to make England Catholic again. And this cost thousands and thousands their lives. So this is all she is remembered for. But also, we have to remember that this mindset of wanting to go back in history is actually very seldom working unless you do it in a very smart way. And you do what is called invent the tradition, reinvent the tradition, and apply it to the now. And that is what we also see happening when we look at women who are successful. They somehow manage to reinvent the tradition of male policies or politics and then apply it in their own lives. But at the same time, we do need to remember that none of these high-placed women rose up in a vacuum. They actually were all very well prepared. They had, if nothing else, they had the experience of observing the rulers around them. They had skills and they had experience that mattered. We know that Benazir Bhutto shadowed her father, who went on vital missions, on very high-level missions. She was with him. We know that both Benazir Bhutto and Megawati Sukarno-Putri both were very popular politicians, very seasoned politicians who actually were in charge of a political movement. Megawati Sukarno-Putri led a political party before she was elected the vice president, and after that became the president. So, but basically what we are seeing, that these prejudices against queens, women prime ministers, presidents in the past and in now, they are linked with prejudice of women of all backgrounds, all social levels and all religions. And this brings me to the topic of intersectionality, the word that Kimberly Crenshaw taught us. Because I thought that Mary Maxfield did us a great service by thinking deeper about this and by teaching us that intersectionality is not just that you, for example, are in, I'm just giving an example now. Ibu Atun Wardatun is Indonesian, is Muslima, is from Lombok, correct, Ibu? And a professor and a mother, correct? So I'm just saying, and an activist. Oh, if I go on, I have too many identities. So I'm sticking to 6 identities right now. All these identities somehow are linked together, create and make who Ibu Atun Wardatun is, but also expose her. They expose her, for example, today to someone Zoom bombing this meeting. They give her that there is a what do you call it, an impression about what she stands for. But what Mary Maxfield has told us is that all these identities are actually so closely linked, you cannot tear them apart. You cannot. And one example that they give is the women who are elaborating on this. For example, if you stand on the corner of a street, you are not on the one street and you're not on the other street. You are basically in both streets, and you cannot divide the streets that you are standing on. And so it is mixed. And so that means that you cannot escape who you are, and that who you are, for example, if based on your identity, you experience racism, right? Then that racism influences your identity, and it changes the shape of the sexism against you, and the sexism changes who you are. And that is what is left is a very particular type of misogyny, a very particular misogynist form of discrimination, of prejudice, of targeting you for who you are. I think a marvelous example of Professor Shahla's book is The Queen of Sheba, because she was a queen. She was someone of obviously great wisdom, high spiritual level. However, the medieval mufassirun, the medieval interpreters, had to give her a husband or put her in a harem or make her something that in their mind belonged to her identity as a woman. They could not live with the idea that the Quran does not mention any of it. It had to be added. And so that is, you know, and it is this reality that brings me to Professor Musdah Mulia's book, because this intertwined forms of discrimination and oppression that the book by Professor Mulia addresses. And that is why it needs to be an encyclopedia, because you cannot do it in less than over 700, almost 800 words. You need, or not words, pages. You need those pages, because of course, Professor Musdah starts with the interpretation of the holy texts, and she starts with the, what do you call it, education, the need for education, and thinking about the character and the values and the sensibilities and the worldview that is needed to be a successful Muslim woman, a successful agent of change, and a successful leader. Right, and when what I read from her presentations, because unfortunately I don't have the book, I don't have access to it, but when I come, inshallah, back to Indonesia, I will leave a big space in my suitcase to get it and take it back, because I really want it. Because like I said, this book is not written just for Muslimas. This book is written for all women, and it inspires all of us. And but basically what Ibu Musdah argues is that the religion is a force that steers your entire life. It means that it helps you think about the role that you need to play in society, in your community. But it also, in many ways, helps or influences how you can create income, the general level of prosperity that you strive for, not just for you, but also for your environment, and the values that you teach to your children and to the people around you. And this is a very important message, because as feminists, we might all think, as religious feminists, we might all think, oh, of course, that's what we've been doing all the time. But what we forget is that what we easily forget is that we live in a time that in all religions, the holy texts are used as weapons against women. We have seen that here in America. We see that in Christian churches, in certain Christian churches, and we all are trying to fight back. And the fighting back means changing mindsets, changing theoretical frameworks, changing certain ways people think and view the world, and basically somehow showing people that there is much more possible than the very narrow reading of a text or taking the text out of context. So when we look at the different elements that Professor Musdah Mulia mentions, you see she says that a Salihah woman, she educates herself to support humanity, creates harmonious family. In my view, that not just helps the children thrive, but inspires everybody around her. She cares about the rights of children, women, but she cares about all of humanity and fights against all forms of structural injustice and inequality, abuse and violence. And she is concerned about the environment. She strives to create equity between men and women, between Muslim and non-Muslim, between Indonesian and non-Indonesian. That is her goal. And these are goals that are extremely important in our day and age, where we all face enormous challenges. The environmental challenges that we face, the polarization that we face, the technological challenges that we just heard about, that has given hate speech platforms it never had before, and has spread hate speech to such a level that we would not have considered imaginable even 20 years ago. All those developments need action and need that we stand up. And according to Professor Musdah, and I love this one, she said it in one of her talks, we need to apply God's attribute, Allah's attribute of rahmah. In this case, I translated with compassion across society. I think that is so inspiring. We need to have compassion for everybody, for everything around us, because that is what our religion teaches us. That is what God wants us to do. And it means that we also have to reflect God's tawheed. And in my view, tawheed is universal because there is only one God, only one divine being, and who has created us all and rules the world. If you believe in God, that is what you believe. There's only one. And so this inclusive message can give hope for the world. And in this case, it is women who have to take it up and run with it. It is women who have to exercise their agency and responsibility to run with that message. So basically, what I also found very inspiring in Professor Musdah's presentations was that we have to apply all these issues in our immediate context and environment. Like Professor Amy Susanti said at the beginning, you were quoting Foucault, Foucault, and that the power that is not centralized, that can be hidden, it can be local. We have to look at all forms of hidden power that are around us, and we have to create these forms ourselves to take care of our immediate environment. And I love your example, Professor Musdah, in one of your talks where you were talking about a sermon about Palestine, I think on IWDI, which had nothing to do with Indonesia. And Palestine is very important, but most people have never been there, but at the same time, we are facing a pandemic. And so we have to, sometimes we have to make not a hierarchy, but we have to know when to address what. I think that was a very important example that you gave in that talk. And of course, like I said, we should never forget the suffering of the Palestinians. But for most people on Eid al-Fitr in early morning, that is not what they're concerned about when there is a pandemic, when they're facing all kinds of health problems and economic problems and other problems. So the final point I read from Bu Musdah's book, and actually also from Bu Shahla's book, is that you cannot make up reality. You cannot create alternative facts. Those are lies, and lies do not belong to the realm of the divine. Lies are not from God. It is very simple. It is this reinvented reality that is used against women. It invents falsehoods, it spreads prejudice, it dehumanizes women. And it means changing the rules. It tries to change the rules of the game so that women can no longer participate. So the goal is for those who feel they are religious feminists is to change the rule of the game so that women can participate. And actually, when I listened to Professor Musdah's idea and I read them, it reminded me very much of the example of Jacinda Ardern, the current Prime Minister of New Zealand, who really is showing the world what it means to be a Soleha woman, to be an efficient leader, to be compassionate. And for example, I don't know if you read yesterday in the news, it said that her cabinet just passed a rule that allows benefits to women who miscarry. We all know that you can give birth and your child does not survive, which the suffering is immense. But then you have to go back as if nothing happened. And she acknowledges that that is not a reality. She knows the reality of women who go through this kind of suffering and addresses it. But what we also have to remember is this, that education is indeed very important, not just peace education, but education of to teach boys that women matter, to teach boys how to treat girls around them. Because if you think about Jacinta, then you have to realize that her husband must be a very extraordinary man who can manage that his wife is the prime minister, supports her career. She gave birth to a child, seems to help out with the child. I do not know exactly everything in the family, but it makes me think that how important it is that men can have the same humility, the same compassion as women can exercise, and that they are taught that it is not negative, that it is not diminishing them if they support a woman in what she is doing. And I think that is something that is really lacking, again, across the world, because on the face of it, a society might look very advanced, very emancipated, does not mean it is that in reality. So finally, I think that Professor Musdah's message and Professor Shahla's book both remind me about something we were taught in kindergarten: never lie, because it is a sin, not just because it is sin, it's a sin, but speaking the truth will set you free, it will liberate you. Living a life in truth and sincerity is liberating, because lies, you know, create webs, and these webs become very complex. So speaking the truth, speaking out, exercising agency is liberating. And that is something we should always keep in mind. But it needs courage. And we see that too in both of the books. And so basically, both these books remind me of the reality that liberation is not just about losing certain restrictions, about letting go, but it is a call to both women and men to become your real self and to help others to discover who you really are. What is your real self? How have we been created? What have we been created for? And how can we liberate ourselves from all these prejudices, from all these expectations that we can or cannot meet, and at the same time exercise, as I say, our agency and become an agent of change. Thank you.
Wow, thanks a lot, Professor Nelly van Doorn. It was an enlightenment for me. We do agree, as you said, that these two books are thought-provoking, inspiring, and far-reaching, because not only for Muslimah, because we all feel addressed, as you said before. They are also intergenerational, and these books teach us cooperation is a must. Also, I'm very happy that you mentioned about hadith, and you said the hadith was not used until recently. Actually, it tells us how this hadith was utilized to justify sexism. And thanks a lot for positioning these books and relate this book into the story of American and British context. And also, you mentioned about Jacinda Ardern. She's my idol. Thank you so much. And I think the last message from you, never telling lies, and please tell the truth because it will liberate you. I think this is the quote of the day. Thank you again, Professor Nelly van Doorn. And if you come to visit Indonesia, please don't forget to visit Lombok, and we will meet again in person.
I'd love to. And sorry, I have to say goodbye to all of you now. And I ask forgiveness from Professor Siregar that I have to miss your talk. But I suppose that this will be taped and that we can watch it again.
Yeah.
But forgive me, all of you. I'm so sorry I have to miss the rest and I have to miss the discussion. But I thought it would be over at 10. So forgive me that I have to go. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. It was wonderful.
Have a nice day, Professor Nelly.
Bye-bye, all.
Bye. Okay, now our second discussion is Dr. Wahidah Zein Boru Siregar. Dr. Wahidah Zein Boru Siregar is the Vice Rector, leads the academics, the Vice Rector 1, leads the academics and institution development at Islamic State of Sunan Ampel, Surabaya. She earned her doctoral degree from the Australian National University, ANU. She was a postdoctoral fellow for Islamic Studies, post-FI from the Religious Ministry of Indonesia at Western Sydney University. It is my university to earn my PhD. Prior to her current position, she teaches sociology, politics, gender globalization, and social changes in various departments, including Sociology Department, International Relations, and Dirosah Islamiyah. Her research includes women studies on sociology perspective, gender mainstreaming at UIN Sunan Ampel 2015, and Did Gender Matter? Media analysis of factors affecting the unsuccessful battle of Hovifah Indar Parawansa to win East Java gubernatorial elections in 2008 and 2013. Please join me to welcome Dr. Wahidah Zein Boru Siregar. Floor is yours, Ibu. And also you have 20 minutes.
Thank you, Mbak Atun, Dr. Atun Wardatun. Very nice to meet you. Thank you also for Mbak Siti Nurjanah who invited me to join this very important meeting for me. I'm very happy to meet Professor Shahla. I always heard your name. Now I meet you even in virtual.
I'm happy to meet you too.
I'm happy also to meet again to Ibu Professor Musdah Mulia. You can see that I'm wearing bros. It is from her. See? Thank you also for Professor Nelly. It's okay. I can understand that you have another meeting to do. I have read all books, two books written by very prominent feminist scholars and professors. And I think actually I don't want to make a review or analysis on the books, but of course I'm afraid to do that. So my intellectual capacity is still far behind to prominent ladies that are really respectful. But I try to enforce like my thinking about what should we do to strengthen and to develop or to rise the number of women in political world, particularly as a leader. Maybe like Indonesia now, it's hard for us to talk about presidential election or to take female to be a president like Megawati Soekarno-Putri last time, but I think we can hope more women to be leaders in regions or provincial level in Indonesia, because it's also very important, particularly when we already now in autonomy era. So more women getting a position as leader in a region or district or province in Indonesia. As we already know, the books of Ibu Professor Musdah Mulia contains of 16 chapters. Yeah, it's really a thick book. It's encyclopedia. It's really important for us. But I see two chapters that really relevant to what actually written by Ibu Professor Shahla. The two chapters from the book of Ibu Musdah is chapter 5, why we choose democratic system, and chapter 10, developing political power that is kind to women. So when I see Ibu Shahla's book mention 3 parts, the first part talking about sacred sources of authority, the Quran and the Hadith, talking about Queen of Sheba and Aisyah binti Abu Bakar, and on the second part talking about medieval queens, the dynasty and descent, Sayyidah Hura Queen Arwa of Yemen, and Razia Sultan of India. And then the third part talking about contemporary queens, institutionalization of succession, talks about Benazir Bhutto and Ibu Megawati Soekarno Putri. So I try to link books of Ibu Shahla and Ibu Musdah. I do really hope that in the future, 2 of you will write together about these political issues for Muslimah, to make us like having a cheerful feeling about and hope that we can do better for our society. It's really good, I think, what actually Ibu Professor Shahla write in her book, that it gives us hope that women are capable of being political leader. Women are able to be even the queen, the president, because we have the capacity. And it's Ibu Shahla tried to prove it, that in the Quran and Hadith, actually it's clearly mentioned that we have examples of women who are very good in leading her society. We have Queen of Sheba and we have Aisyah bint Abu Bakar. Ibu Shahla said that the mentioning of Queen of Sheba, it's not talk actually about her sovereignty, but about her belief that she's not a Muslim. She needs to be converted to be Muslim by Sulaiman, like that. And for Aisyah, it's really prominent. She is very good reminder of hadith, yeah, of what actually Rasulullah Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam do in his life, and she also very good in citing what actually the saying and the behavior of the Rasulullah. So we know that in many hadiths. And Ibu Shahla said it is not good if hadith that the function actually to explain the Quran, to make us more understand about Quran, then in fact the hadith that used particularly for talking about women politicians, then a bit contrary, become contrary to the Quran. And of course it's not a proper hadith, it's not good hadith. So we need to take more hadiths that really relevant, or saying the message of the Quran to all of us as Muslim, and also as human, as compassion, like what Professor Nelly told us just now. And then I think we need to find what actually a good way for us to move Muslimah go forward in political places, in political position. And Professor Musdah clearly mentioned in her book, in the Encyclopedia of Muslimah Reformists, that democratic system can be a very useful tool for us to make more women to get a position in politics. But we, of course, need to be careful also toward democracy, because instead of its strength, democracy also contains some weaknesses that we need to think about, particularly for women, because it can be used by those who do not have good intention or niat baik, yeah, good niat for helping people, for developing people. And then democracy can also be used to strengthen the power of the incumbents, particularly corrupt incumbents. It's not really good. So democracy can also choose people who do not have a capacity to lead the people. to make good policies to people. And then democracy can also be used by those who are crazy of power and crazy of wealth and property. So they want to own everything in the country. It's a democracy can lead us to do that if we're not very careful in using a democratic system. So it's giving hope to us as Muslim women to be in a position of politics, but also we need to be careful in using the democracy system. And then it's also, it appears that democracy in Indonesia have increasing number of women in parliament, even though it not reached the critical mass as 30% to make a balance in making decision in parliament, but actually it brings us a hope that we can do better. But I think the electoral system that we use in Indonesia, we experience many electoral system, particularly for choosing member of parliament and also for choosing head of district, head of the province, even head of the country, the president. It's also changes every time, like for electoral system, for parliament, for example, we have experienced a closed system of proportional representation. We also have experienced semi-open system of PR, and then fully open system of PR. But in fact, we still haven't reached the 30% numbers as a critical mass, we know, to make a good decision in parliament. And also we also already changed the system for election for head of this head of province and head of the country, the president. Like for example, firstly in Megawati era, it's chosen by the member of parliament and the member of Senate, as we can say that way. And then after Megawati, then it chose like they become the open system as NTV. One person, one vote, like that. But in fact, after Megawati, even we do not have women candidate, female candidate as president. So it's what I mean is, even though we already try to change the electoral system to maybe to help women, but in fact, in reality, it's still hard for women to move forward to be elected in that position, in a very high position. So I go back to Ibu Shahla's book because Ibu Shahla also mentioned about what we should do to be chosen, to be elected as a political leader, a leader of a country. It's like remind us, oh, we need to do this, we avoid to do that. So maybe Ibu Shahla like didn't intentionally talking about that, but I can see many factors that we can use from the books that maybe helpful for women that run to the election. Some factors contribute to the success of female queens. I can see it's support from prominent ulama, Muslim scholars, support from husband or father, support from political system, support from military members. Also, of course, the ability of the women themselves, they need to improve themselves, yeah. And then we can also very important support from media at this time, in the global time, and the development of a very fast development of science and technology, information and technology. Media plays a very important role, and Ibu Shahla mentioned clearly in her book that when many president candidate for Iran actually did not mention at all by the media, even the US, that we know as a very democratic country. So support from media, it's really, really important for women. So last thing that I want to say here, that we need to examine, to analyze what actually female candidates need to do if they want to win the election. Of course, it's a lot of effort, should be a lot of efforts from them, because we don't belong to any dynasty, for example, in Indonesia. Anybody can run, actually. It's like a double standard. If men actually also coming from a prominent family and women coming from prominent family, but then justification for women is stronger than for men. So it's not good. It's double standard, I think. We know, for example, now sons of President Jokowi, son-in-law of President Jokowi become head of district in Solo and in Medan. It's of course they can be in the position because of the president, but then when Ibu Megawati coming to the position, they think that it's just because of a father. I think it's just the same, but the double standard of people making us having to have more efforts to promote to ourselves to be elected in the position. And then we need to see the result of the election, what actually the women do in the parliament, what they do when they become president. Are they very kind to women or not? Or it's really important. Actually, we cannot also, in my view, like put negative thinking on those female who maybe do not have feminist ideas, or they do not have like understanding from academic or intellectual theorists like us. They need our support. So we need to support them, not just like punish them, like you don't work for women, you don't work for this, you don't work for that, because they don't know what to do there. But they are already in the position. So what we need to do, actually be kind to them, try to give more training for what actually you need to do. When you talk about women, actually, you're also talking about people. When you talk about men, you're also talking about people. So like that, I think I agree with Ibu Shahla that we also need to think about men to support us to be in political position. I think not many feminists agree for what I said just now, but from what we see in book of Ibu Shahla, it's clearly without support of her husband or her father, maybe the queen in India and in Yemen cannot actually run very well in her leadership. And the last one, I would like to highlight that we see actually 3 challenges that faced by women when they want to run in for political position. The first is social factors, social and cultural factor. The second is economic factor, and the third one is institutional factor or structural factor. And in my research on Ibu Hovifah losing the 2 gubernatorial election in 2008 and 2013, actually institutional factor become the hardest for her. In East Java, people already know that women are capable. Ibu Hovifah have been chosen to be a governor of East Java, but actually institutionally hard for her to run freely her position. I think that's all what I can say. I'm sorry, maybe it's not really understandable, but I already try my best. Thank you, Mbak Atun. I give it back to you.
Okay, thank you, Doctor. Yeah, I think Dr. Wahidah tries to link the 2 books, and when Professor Shahla gives us hope through her book that leadership capacity is actually integrated within women's qualities, and the leadership capacity should be located into particular political system to support. And talking about this particular political system, Professor Musdah has mentioned about democratic system. In spite of having shortage, democratic system can be a useful media for women to claim authority, especially in political position. Professor Shahla also mentioned about how can female get the power. They should have support from political system, family and kinship ties, military and religious elite and media, also their personal qualities. And when we talk about their personal qualities, we can refer to the characteristic of Muslimah reformist as mentioned by Professor Musdah or Muslihah Muslimah. I think, yeah, you also provide us with more clarity on understanding about these two books. Now we are going to have times to discuss and question and answers. I think we have some questions and comments from the chat. Do you want me to read about this? Okay. Yeah, sure. I will read the first question. I think this is addressed to both writers, both speakers. Okay, the best concept, this is from Bustomi, Magister student from FISIP UNER Surabaya. The best concepts in reconstruction of the old interpretation about religion is not easy to be delivered or explained to the target we want. Sometimes the problem is there are some distance or gap between the feminist scholar and the ordinary woman as our target to be enlightened. Feminism, for example, is quite success in big cities, but not in villages. Okay, it is debatable. Which woman in village is the biggest victims from the patriarchal system as we criticize today through this amazing webinar? The gap is also not in letter-like perspective, but also in parables aspects, especially the languages we use as the tools to speak with the target. Many books or references we have still look like living in a sky, but at the same time, the target is living on Earth. This is, I think, one of the biggest barriers to reach or even ask the target to join with this enlightened program. Is it a book or reference, for example, in local language exists? If it exists, how to connect among the dots, for example, if the local ways or local language references exist, so then it will a big movement with big social political bargaining compared with the established patriarchal system. Okay, that's the first question or the first comment. You can give a response, both Professor Musdah and Professor Shahla, but I think I will read the second one because I think this is also part of response to the first question or comment. From Professor Edith. From a grassroots perspective, ordinary women's empowerment is essential in order to support courageous women who pursue public office to change policies towards equality. Thus, the ordinary woman is not ordinary at all, I agree. She is the role model and leader of raising human beings, of managing the many aspects of home life, and they must be empowered. The ordinary woman can begin her agency and respectfully elevate the role that women play and that society ascribes to them. I will give time to Professor Shahla first to respond to these two comments or questions. Floor is yours, Professor Shahla, please.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Wahidah Zein, for this wonderful discussion of our books. And thank you, Dr. Wardatun. These questions are great. They are just very profound. They require a lot more thinking and talking and a lot more time to respond to that. I can sympathize with this whole idea of the distance between or the distance in the language and communication between feminists or women who are educated, women who are back in the villages, or ordinary women who are not ordinary at all, are quite extraordinary for what they do. But the problem that I can just think about it offhand is institutional, in the sense of how our educational systems are organized and conducted, and what messages do get communicated to the people, not just in the villages, but all over the country, and how and who controls the channels through which particular ideas could be communicated to individuals. I remember, for example, when I was living in Pakistan, for Pakistani feminists to communicate the messages, let's say the whole idea of preventing pregnancy or the preference for male child, for them to convey that message to the public that was actually didn't have high literacy, they would go to these villages and perform skits, perform short plays to bring out some of the points they wanted to do. But that is not available to many people to do it. In many countries, particularly in Muslim countries, or at least the ones that I know of, much of the opportunities to convey such messages are blocked. You cannot communicate, you cannot share your ideas with the people. As I said, because of institutional barriers, because of other situations. And remember, women have to live with men, and women have to be provided by men, and their lives are dependent on so many of these men. So even if you were able to communicate to them through whatever means you had, you could not necessarily expect an immediate response. But the challenge is there and is long-term. We just have to keep at it. We have to find ways of overcoming institutional barriers to be able to speak, whether it's through poetry, through channels, through wayangs, through whatever local means that are available to us to communicate with people and to tell them how the message, as was mentioned by Professor Nelly and Professor Musdah Mulia, that the mess, and I was trying to say that the message has been turned into an alternative reality, turned into stories to mislead many of us and to pretend as if this is the real thing, this is the real message. I remember Professor Rifat Hassan in Pakistan, who wrote a beautiful article about the misrepresentation of the story of the revelations regarding Adam and Eve in the Quran versus the biblical assumptions or the stories that was popular within the Muslim countries. So it is important to be able to really sift out what we see to be the truth, what we see to be the message of one God, the message of Tawheed, the message of reform, and communicate that. But it's not easy. But the job is long term, and we just have to continue and keep at it.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Professor Shahla. I think Professor Musdah has left the room because she has a bad internet connection. It is raining cat and dog in Jakarta, she said. She sent me a private message through WhatsApp message. Okay, and I think I will give task again to you. I'm sorry for this, because there is another question here from Asfa Fikriya. If now women still get differentiation in public area, what is the reason? The causes are from external side or internal one. Which one is more dominant and how to solve it? Thanks a lot.
Okay. Let me see if I understood the question correctly.
Yeah.
Do you mind just repeating the first part of the question?
Yeah. If now women still get differentiation, I think gender segregated, something like that, in public area. What is the reason?
Well,
Why?
Go on, sorry.
Yeah, you can go ahead.
Well, I mean, you know, in much of the world, including the Muslim world, the assumption is that there is something in the nature of the differences between male and female. Obviously, men and women are different, right? But just because their nature are different doesn't mean that their intelligence or mind are different from each other. But that assumption has become so prominent, so dominant, that it is automatically assumed that women in you know, Muslim women, all women, are incapable of thinking, distinguishing right from wrong, laying out their own path to salvation and spirituality. So it is this whole idea of women being, you know, a minor needing her father to give her permission or her husband to give her permission because her nature demands that, and she has to be controlled and she has to be led. There is no reasons for that. But because of this alternative reality that has been propagated throughout centuries, and of course, many women do believe that themselves. So it takes
Sorry.
So it will take a long time to be able to remove these layers of falsity. I mean, look at what's happening in the US. Many women are now pushing to have, as I said, a seat in the public, on the political table, and they're becoming more and more successful. But at the same time, there is greater and greater push on the part of the more traditional, the more conservative, the fundamentalist, shall we say, in this country, who's trying to find justifications for women's different nature through the holy scriptures, be it Christianity, you know, the Bible or the Torah or the Quran. But it is up to women, as Professor Musdah Mulia said, to reinterpret these messages of divine and just to lay out the truth, or, you know, the way that it treats humanity, be they male or female, in one, as one paykat, as one body, as, you know, as many of our poets, Persian poets have said, that humanity is one, members of one body, be it male or female. So there shouldn't be any differences, but that's what we have been told, and that's what we have been treated as.
Okay, thank you, Professor Shahla. We're still waiting for Professor Musdah actually, but I saw my watch. We've been here in the room for 2.5 hours. Now in the central time where I'm at, this is Lombok at central time of Indonesia, my watch shows 10:38, so almost 11 in the night. So I think it's already late. So I think we can end our discussion. Actually, we still want to have your time, but yeah, we will have another time to have. So I think there is no specific conclusion from me, but I'm sure that we learn so much lesson tonight, and I myself feel like having more confidence